How did crypto bros become such a powerful political force?
They should not be subject to the same regulation as banks.
Why is the right considered today's counterculture?
They're all way better than this!
When did clean energy become too lip-coated?
Confront the climate crisis.
Just some of the stuff we explore in the Culture Lab, the marvelous mad science of how the zeitgeist shapes our politics. Hosted by data scientists and pollsters, Kyla Van Ellenfitch and Gabe DeRoche. Join every week as they bring together data, their own insights, and a special guest to put a different loaded question under the microscope. Culture Lab, a brand new podcast from Air Quotes Media, creators of Curse of Politics, The Hurly Burly, and Hotel Pacifico. Subscribe now.
Hello, Geoff.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Never better.
Never better. Great.
Well, I'm getting on my my Speedo because you and I are going to dive into a deep pool of red ink for our discussion today with our first guest. So avert your eyes, guests. Avert your eyes. Then we're also going to get an update today with a second guest on the pod. We're going to hear from Peace River South MLA Larry Neufeld on what's happening in Tumbler Ridge and how we can help. So we're looking forward to that. And then in Strategy Suite, Geoff and I will discuss the politics of the budget. And the nominations are in, but we don't know who's yet on the ballot for the Conservatives. We'll talk about an update on the Conservative leadership race. But our guest today, to start off the show, to help us understand what the heck is in that budget and what it means and how it happened and all the assumptions that underlie it, is Dr. Kevin Milligan from UBC, professor of economics. He's an economist who's made a career out of reading budget documents so the rest of us don't have to. He's a taxation expert, someone who's studied the impact of demographics, you name it. He spent many years digging into numbers behind government budgets across Canada and where the trade-offs are. So he's going to help us unpack, last week's budget. And when we say unpacking, we're not talking about carry-on luggage. We're talking about a 747 full of Samsonite that the government's left us. So welcome, Kevin.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
What's your overall take on the budget?
Well, a couple positive things and a couple less positive things. So let's start with the positive. I think their eyes are on the right target, which is making sure that BC's economy continues to grow. They have a lot of measures in there where they're trying to boost growth, and they didn't choose tax measures that would particularly hurt growth. So that's good. And they also have a target on debt to GDP. Growing the GDP is the size of the economy, so growth helps the debt to GDP ratio, and they seem to be quite focused on that. And that matters because we have billions of dollars of debt that we have to place every year with those who buy debt, the insurance companies and banks and pension funds. And we don't want to pay more interest than we have to. And if those folks become afraid that we're not going to be able to pay our interest on our debt, then they're going to charge us higher interest. And that just starts to build on itself. And we end up in a bad situation. So that's one good thing. The other good thing is, one of the choices they made, which is, again, having that target on debt to GDP ratios, thinking about the capital spending plan. So there's been a lot of, teasing about the repacing or strategic sequencing, the phrases they've used of slowing their capital plan. But I think it's the right choice. We really had an ambitious capital plan, and pull that back a bit helps that debt to GDP metric start to look a bit more, tame the trajectory a bit. So those are the two positive things. Two things that I think are a bit weak here is they've kind of put themselves on hard mode here. And the biggest way they did that was with the public sector wage increases of, the one big BCG-EU settlement of 12% over 4 years that, according to reports, that was supposed to be like a one-off, but it looks like the nurses union, the hospital workers union are getting that. My faculty association is in negotiations right now, and rumors I hear is that we might be in line for the same. That's just an extraordinarily generous settlement given where we are. And that's really put things in hard mode. And that kind of, all of the, 10 million here and 20 million here kind of savings and readjustments they're doing just kind of get swamped, because that 3% a year is 1.5 billion a year in extra expenditures across the public service in BC. You compound that over 4 years, and that ends up to 7 billion a year of extra spending by year 4. So that's just really, like I said, putting it on hard mode. Last quick point is you put all this together, and frankly, they didn't get it done. The trajectory of debt to GDP, they did tweak it down by about 1 point from 38% to 37% by year 3 of the plan. But it's still growing at 3% a year. And that's just too fast a trajectory of growth to tame us from becoming worst among the provinces. So there's my overall quick takes. Not sure how quick that was.
Can we just on debt GDP for a second, just for the sake of our audience here? So this is a measure of the entire public debt of British Columbia divided by the size of our economy, right? The GDP, right?
Yeah, that's it. So debt is the debt that comes from the annual deficits that we have, but also the capital plan, the what we're spending on roads and hospitals and schools. Those are all great things to have. They add a lot to our quality of life. This is a big advantage we have in BC, is to have a great infrastructure and getting better. But we're accumulating debt to do that. So you take all of that debt, the deficits plus the capital plan, you divide that by the size of our economy. And where we've gone in BC on that is, let me pull up my chart here. Back in 2017, we were at 15% of debt to GDP. Now we're quickly approaching 30% and on a trajectory to hitting 37, 38%. When you look back in the mid-2010s again, other provinces, Quebec was at 50%. Ontario was at 40%. We were way down there at 15%. We had a great advantage. We didn't have to spend tax dollars on interest. We could spend it on capital plan. We could spend it on teacher salaries. We could spend it on good public services. But now we're in a position where we are fast approaching those bad boys of Confederation, the ones who would pile on a lot of debt. We're now joining that club. We're not there yet, but on the trajectory that we're on track to being among the worst in the country.
Well, your 4 points were great because it gives us a bit of a roadmap through the conversation. And so I'd like to go back to the economy part, because if you can grow the economy, then your situation improves without having to make cuts, you hope. And the government's tried to do a bit of everything here, I think. Was there a big bang solution on the economy side that you think they missed or overlooked? And I'm thinking about maybe tax cuts for manufacturing investment, that kind of thing that would arguably really stimulate investment. Was there something they drove by and should have done?
Well, I have my economist diploma on the wall, and I have to say GST. But we've been around that block for a couple decades here in BC now.
Well, that we should pause on that just quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
Because we all know what a stinker the HST was in 2011 and went to province-wide referendum and failed. And after a remarkable grassroots campaign by the forces of darkness, Bill Thielman. Was Thielman involved in that one, Geoff?
100%.
Thielman and Van der Zalm.
Yeah, it was Thielman and Van der Zalm.
The odd couple.
If someone wants to search the depths of YouTube, you can find me debating Thielman and Van der Zalm on somewhere on Vancouver Island back in 2010. That was an experience.
Fantastic. Well, two Dutch guys up to trouble there. Well, the point is that by broadening the PST to now include accounting services and engineering and architectural services and a bunch of other things, it's like the PST is kind of becoming a GST anyways. So why not, I think with our back against the wall in the fiscal situation, I wonder whether it's going to come around again by necessity this time, that we don't really have a choice.
So why is it that economists really like the HST and really like value-added tax in general? The reason is that, there's two ways to raise the same amount of money. One is have a very narrow tax with a high rate, The other one is have a broad tax that covers almost everything in the economy. You can have a lower rate.
Yeah.
And the way we tend to think about it as economists is having something that covers almost everything with a low rate is just better than having a narrow tax with a high rate. It just means that the economy functions more efficiently. People get to make their choices without thinking too much about taxes because everything is kind of taxed the same. And that's where we want to go as economists. So this measure of expanding a bit the PSC to cover more professional services that's in the budget is, I think, a good step because, again, that means they don't have to increase the rate. They can raise more revenue by covering more of the economy. And that was the basic logic of the HST was you're going to cover the services sector along with the goods sector. And the service sector is the one that's been growing a lot over the past decades in the economy. And you don't want to, leave the tax system not generating revenue from all parts of the economy. Because again, it's not that economists are revenue hungry or that we like to inflict pain on people. It's just we want to have, for the same bucket of revenue, you can do it more effectively by having a low rate on more things.
Okay.
Kevin, I think part of what the HST debate has confused the minds of, I would say, left progressive observers is that it actually is hard to evade as well. So there's although left wingers have said, oh man, we can't do this because it's really it's going to hammer working people who are paying for a lot of these low costs, because you can balance that out elsewhere in the tax system, but you then capture the big ticket consumption items being paid by wealthier British Columbians, which I think is an argument that needs to be revisited. But the second part of your comments, let's just touch there briefly, because I would have said housing, for example, that was one that after Mike and I had our conversation, I was surprised to realize when I saw the commentary the next day that $1.4 billion in hoped for housing investment was canceled. The rug was ripped out from the nonprofit sector. That seemed counterintuitive to me because that seemed to be stimulatory spending. It was on an issue of housing, which was important to people. It was, locally spent. Like, what was happening there? What was going through their minds?
So, my limited praise there for pulling back on the capital expenditure plan wasn't so much about which ones they chose to resequence and to repace. Perhaps they made a poor chouse in.
Maybe they could just say delay.
Versus,
Delay might be a good word.
Let's use delay. Let's speak plainly. Delay. Housing is one where housing costs are high in BC. It's an impediment to hiring people to come to BC. It's an impediment for those who live here who are struggling with income. And so doing more on that seems like there's a good case for it. If I were to make the other case, though, it's that our population actually declined over the past 12 months and is projected to continue to do so. Actual rents have fallen by something like 15% since the peak 2 years ago. And that's not any real adjustment or inflation. This is actual rents that you're paying out of your bank account have actually fallen over the past 2 years. So that suggests that the housing market is maybe not on boil as much as it was.
The vacancy rate's at the highest level in Metro Vancouver than it's been in 40 years.
If any listeners out there are landlords, they'll know you don't have 30 people standing outside in a line to view your property when you're trying to list it like you did 2 years ago. So that might be a justification for it. In general, like it may have come off the boil, but the rates are still very high. The rents are high, housing costs are high here. So, that might be what's going through their head of repacing that one more than perhaps the other ones.
Guess with the Olympics just over, we're all feeling that Team Canada pride and maybe a little nostalgic for Vancouver 2010. But just wearing the maple leaf isn't what makes our athletes Canadian. It's who they represent and where they're bringing their medals home at the end of the games. When it comes to the Government of Canada's Buy Canadian policy, or the way we define sovereignty for important infrastructure such as AI, we need to make a similar distinction. Currently, the policy, and indeed the way sovereignty is being used in strategic policies, allows foreign companies with just a presence in Canada the same advantages as Canadian companies that are actually headquartered, owned, and operated within our borders. A vague definition of what it means to buy Canadian won't cut it, and that's why presenting sponsor TELUS is encouraging a more robust solution. Like Olympic medals, TELUS is recommending a tiered classification system that evaluates companies on key criteria, including location, corporate structure, hardware control, and workforce. For example, bronze for companies meeting basic Canadian presence requirements, silver for for companies with significant operations here, but headquartered elsewhere. And gold, reserved for Canadian-owned and headquartered companies that have demonstrated a long-term commitment to Canadian innovation and employment. The AI opportunity in Canada and BC represents a major potential contribution to our GDP, and many companies will benefit. Let's ensure that truly Canadian businesses get top-tier consideration. And with the Government of BC's Look West strategy, rather than looking outside of BC to bring in AI infrastructure, let's promote the strong contenders already invested and entrenched in our communities. After all, we should keep rooting for the home team.
What's your take on the capital budget, though? Like, it's one thing to reduce the capital budget to make it more affordable, but the fact is the capital within that budget has been subject to a lot of overruns. And I'm not saying this is, because it's an NDP government. It happens to all sorts of governments. But why is it that we're seeing all these capital overruns? I mean, is this something you're seeing across the board in the rest of Canada and North America?
It definitely is. Thinking of transit projects as an example, in Ontario, they just opened up a new east-west crosstown LRT, the Eglinton crosstown LRT, which was originally started construction in 2011, was supposed to take like 8 years to finish in like 2019, and it just finished now in 2026. So like 8 years on itself seems to me to be a long time, but it was delayed so long, it's way over budget. Interesting, when I was looking up the details on that, other transit projects in Ontario over the past 20 years have come in on budget. We'll remember here that the Canada line came in on time and under budget here as well. We've had more problems with the Broadway subway. Now, how much of that is, COVID delays? How much of that is labor market tightness over 2022 and 2023? That might be part of it, but I think there is a lot to learn on how to do these big projects and do them well. There are examples of places, thinking of transit, I've read a lot about in Europe where they seem to get transit projects done for a fraction of the cost that we're able to here in North America in general. But I think we should have an eye on that. I really hope that we can learn from the mistakes. Maybe in Ontario, they'll dig into what went wrong and their big Eglinton crosstown LRT, because this seems like the delays there are just ridiculous. And I think there's room to do better on those. There's room to save by doing a better job. And so I think we should look into that.
So a bond rater looking at the BC situation, and I'm sure we'll go through other slices of this, but looking at the capital plan, there are assets generated by the capital investment. It's a transit system or a long-term care home, a hospital, whatever it is. So does slowing down impact them at all? I'm sure they're in a gloomy mood about the BC budget, but does the delay in capital spending make them feel better?
So when you look at the actual capital spending plan, you look deep into the appendices of the budget. It lists like every school, every highway project. And you look, these are all good projects, right? It's going to expand the highway here. It's going to retrofit your kid's school there, build new hospitals and other places, new bridges, the Massey Tunnel replacement. These are things that enhance productivity. Furthermore, I've just been engaged here at the Vancouver School of Economics of trying to recruit some people from abroad to come join us here. And we got 2 people to sign up, so we're super excited about that. We weren't able to pay more than other places. These are people who had offers at some of the best institutions in the world. What really helped them to come is the quality of life here. And honestly, the quality of life, when you drive down the street here, when you go to the hospital here versus some other places, it's good. This is something that adds to our attractiveness. So I'm a big fan of all of that. That said, the capital plan, even after these delays that have been put in place, we're still spending more per capita than Ontario or Quebec or other provinces. So it's still pretty generous out there. We just kind of cut it back a bit from what was a supersized capital spending plan. I don't think this is wasted money. Caveat what Mike was saying about making sure we do a good job in the actual construction sequencing. We're getting good things out. We're getting things that enhance quality of life, that enhance corporate ability to invest here. You can get your goods to market. You can get your employees to work. These are things that matter for the economy here. But that said, what does a debt rating agency look at? If I'm from a debt rating agency, I'm from a big pension fund, I see that the province is spending on good stuff. This is stuff that they should be spending on. This is not wasting money. That said, the bottom line is our debt to GDP is growing at 3 or 4% a year. We're at a not bad place now. That trajectory, if you don't tame it, if you don't bend the curve, 3, 4 years from now, which is not very long, 3 or 4 years from now, we're going to be at like 40% of our economy in debt. And that is going to be.
How's that compared to other provinces?
Yeah. So where Ontario is as of 24-25 is 36%. Quebec is 38%. And I should note, comparing to other provinces, continue the tour there, think of our friends in Atlantic Canada, which we often think of as being a bit more indebted. Newfoundland and Labrador, 44%. PEI, 28%. We are joining that club. That's
28%, Geoff. 28% PEI. I told you, the potatoes last week, we're right down there with the potatoes.
This is not a club we want to join.
We're above the potato level.
The other thing to note, I looked across the table here, and you compare to 2021. So, we had COVID. We all put on a lot of debt, the federal government mostly, but provinces as well. It was a once-in-a-century pandemic. Everyone gets a freebie for that, right? You had to put on some debt during the pandemic. After the pandemic, though, in every single province, debt to GDP has come down. BC has continued to rise. So where other provinces made an adjustment post-pandemic, we kept the kind of the pedal to the metal and kept on loading on debt where other provinces didn't. So I think that's kind of the difference maker of why we're in a different position than some other provinces.
Well, you touch on many sensitive points there for me, but I mean, of course, Horgan, during the pandemic, I went and took a look. We plunged, as everybody did, into deficit from a surplus position, so down $5 billion. Then bounced back up, and then had a surplus, a one-year surplus, which people are angry at David Eby for spending, but it was either that or send it back to the bond traders, and he decided to keep it here in BC.
Come on. Send it back to the bond traders.
No, there's a law that says you have to pay.
I mean, you're lowering your interest rate. You're lowering your interest payment if you pay down debt.
That's right, but you could be spending on other things. That's not a pure good. You could.
When you're borrowing more, you're sending
it
to the bond traders.
Okay, well, I think we could be. We're currently, as Kevin is saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kevin, but we're now getting into the middle of the pack. Nobody is saying they want to be the worst in the pack, and the poor finance minister says she's just about ready to go into the witness protection program. I don't find anybody out there saying, let's keep going because this is perfect. And so my next question is this. Whoever wins the next election, whenever that may be, is going to have this situation in front of them, Kevin. What should they do?
Yeah, it's a tough problem. And, they took some measures here with revenue, with cutting back a bit on public service headcounts. And so that's, starting to make some move to bend that curve. And those are the right steps, the right direction to go. But, if you actually want to bend that curve, it's pretty simple. You got to raise more revenue or cut expenses. And there are some places you could go for that. On the expenses side, where I was noting the fairly generous public sector wage increase a few minutes ago. That's one part of the equation. The other part is the head count. And in this budget, they do have a trajectory to try to cut down some of the growth that we saw. I just want to point out that since 22-23, so that's only 3 fiscal years ago, the head count just in the ministries, this doesn't count the hospital workers, people at universities, just in the ministries, went up by 17%. So they have a plan to cut that back a bit. Part of that is going to be frontline service delivery, right? The people who are in the when you're getting your license renewed at ICBC, when you're getting these kind of things done, having good service there, we value that. That's a good thing. But that's still a big increase that we saw there in like ministry level job count. So thinking about that as a place to cut back, if we're locked into these 3% a year wage things, you don't want to break those. That's something that's quite hard to do. But thinking about the head count is going to be something that's going to matter. On the revenue side, continuing to broaden the PST, heading towards what Mike was noting is getting closer to the HST. Broad-based tax increases would be somewhere else you can go. Thinking about the housing taxes, they did increase the school tax, which is just property tax for higher value properties, is a direction they've already taken. I'm not sure how much more they want to go there. But those are the choices on the table, right? To balance the budget, there's not a magic button to press. You're going to increase revenue, you're going to decrease the trajectory of expenses. I would also note, this is about trajectories, right? You're not going to do it in 1 year very easily. It's about setting the trajectory so that they're closing rather than increasing. And that's one of the numbers that really kind of troubled me when I dug into it. Even after the Minister of Finance, Brenda Bailey, was talking about this, how the tough choices she made, it's still the case over the 3-year horizon that expenditures are growing more quickly than revenues. Mm-hmm. And so, she did some work. She did some work to find some more revenue. She did some work to start bending that trajectory of expenditure management, but it's just not there yet. And there's more work to be done. No matter if we have an election, no matter who would win it, no matter who is sitting in the Ministry of Finance, they have work to do.
Can we talk about credit ratings for a second? Because back when I was associated with BC Liberal government, there was this mantra that, oh my God, if we fell below 20 or went above 20% debt GDP, we would have a credit downgrade and the sky would fall in. Now we've had multiple credit downgrades since, and the sky maybe hasn't fallen in, but there's obviously a consequence to it. How big of an increase in interest rate, I guess, is it when there's a downgrade? How material is it?
So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we can think about it as, when you go from, and every rating agency has their own thing of AA, AAA, AA plus, that kind of thing. But just going down a category, you're looking at, less than a percentage point. So a fraction of a percentage point. Does that matter? Yeah, it does add up over time. And, whether it's
the more debt you have, the more it's going to make a difference, obviously.
And that is a metric that the government has been focused on. There's the share of revenue that's going to debt interest. It's going from this year, it's 4.9 cents. So 5 cents on the dollar of taxes are going to interest. By 3 years from now, it's going up to 8 cents on the dollar. So that's from 5 cents to 8 cents. And again, that trajectory is the kind of thing we're worried about. So if that went from 8 cents to 8.5 cents or 9 cents because the interest rate increased because of the debt agencies, that's the stuff that starts to get material. Before we set our hair on fire about that, we think back to the 1990s and the federal situation then. They were in a world where they were spending 35 cents on the dollar of revenue on interest. And so that's, we're not close to that yet. We're not close to even where Saskatchewan was in the 90s or Quebec was 20 years ago or Newfoundland has been. We're not in that situation yet. So we need to be calm and reason on how we think about this. It's the trajectory. We don't want to get to that situation. The way to avoid getting there is to bend that curve.
So either going in the wrong direction or going in the right direction. And
yeah, that's it.
To your point about the 90s, this is where my own fiscal conservatism took root, was going through those massive deficits and being very concerned about the amount. 35 cents to pay debt was ridiculous, right? Or pay the interest for the debt. Now, today, I think I just Googled it, and it's about 10 or 11 cents federally. So it's not, you're not stuck in that situation forever. If you get the trajectory going in the right basis. And when you said earlier that Newfoundland's at 44% debt GDP, we're closing in on Newfoundland. Newfoundland's always been the basket case of fiscal federalism, and historically. And so obviously they've managed to bring it down over the years, right?
Yeah. Other provinces that face this, Quebec did a fantastic job over the last 20 years of turning around their debt to GDP. If you look at the numbers there, same thing. They did it through all of these things: revenue management, expenditure management. It wasn't a 1-year thing. It was about setting those trajectories. Back to this measure of how many cents on the dollar goes to interest. One way to think about it, I'm someone who likes a place with good public services and good public investment. I think government programs can really enhance the quality of life. But the challenge is, as a politician, if you're going out there and saying, please give me more tax revenue, but you only get 65 cents of services for every dollar of tax you pay, that's an uphill battle, right? If you can keep the interest costs lower, then you can say, look, you pay me $1 of taxes, I'm going to give you $1 of better services, better hospitals, better schools, better roads. That's an easier sell if you're from, the more progressive end of the political distribution, rather than saying, here, give me $1 or I'll give you 50 cents of services. That's a harder sell.
So basically, we're going from borrowing at pension fund level rates to borrowing from Capital Direct.
Yeah, that's one way to think about it. Yeah.
Uber Eats might bring dinner, but this hydrogen truck is delivering the future. That's right. A hydrogen-powered grocery truck has been driving around BC. This is a full-size Class 8 truck that makes real deliveries between the Lower Mainland and Squamish. The demonstration brings together a broad partnership that includes our sponsor, Fortis BC, H-Tech, the Alberta Motor Transport Association, the BC Trucking Association, Deloitte, Transport Canada, the Province of BC, and Hyundai Motor Company. They've launched the first sustained commercial demonstration of a hydrogen-fueled heavy-duty truck in the province. The goal is simple. See how this technology actually performs when it has to deal with hills, traffic, weather, and deadlines, just like every other truck on the road. Since mid-October of last year, it's logged hundreds of kilometers and it's generated real-world data on things like range, fueling, and performance. Fortis BC is supporting the project through its Clean Growth Innovation Fund to help make the demonstration possible. It's part of a broader effort to explore lower carbon solutions for sectors that are especially tough to decarbonize, and heavy-duty trucking is right at the top of that list. The insights from this pilot will help inform future decisions about hydrogen vehicles and infrastructure in BC. It's a practical, real-world example of how collaboration and innovation can move the conversation on lower emission transportation forward. Fortis BC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast.
Just to go back briefly to I think there's a theme emerging in what you're saying, Kevin, which is that on the capital side, the execution of the projects and the management of the expenditures is very, very important. And probably we had such a big capital agenda that we were losing our grip on that front. So this is all good. Although politically, I have to say, I counted at least 4 significant communities, significant to all parties politically, where long-term care homes are being canceled, housing projects that people had their hearts set on are being canceled, and so on. That's all bad news and reinforces, I think, in the public's mind that the finances are in a place where they don't want them to be. But to go over to the public service side, many people have pointed to the BCGU settlement, which I never thought for one second would be contained to the BCGU. But the president of the BCGU, Paul Finch, says, "Yeah, well, there's way too many managers here, and you can just dig in there, cut back on all that bloat at the management sector, and then things will turn around." But in reality, I think execution is critical to the management down of the costs inside government. The collective agreement's locked now, so you're going to have to change business practices, maybe do layoffs, maybe you're going to have to consider privatization where you didn't want to before. And to do that, you need actually to protect that management sector and make sure that they're performing at their top capacity. Doesn't mean you need to hire more of them, but do you see a challenge ahead? And what have other provinces done in the face of this? I mean, you could just cut, you could just lay off people, you could cancel programs. Are there best practices emerging for the management of the public service in a situation like this?
So I don't have the answers, but I think these are the right questions. Thinking about that, I remember seeing those ads as the BCGEU was doing their negotiations about the managers and painting them as the big enemy here. And we should look at those metrics. I don't have those metrics in front of us. Are we doing different than other medium-sized big provinces on that? How do we do relative to the private sector? How do we do relative to other places that manage big workforces? Those are the right questions to ask. Because you want to save in the right place. You don't want to be in a situation where you're cutting back the frontline workers so that management avoids tough choices. So those are the good questions to ask. The one thing I would add to that is going back to the overall expenditure management and thinking, how do you balance off, within the public service, the balance of frontline versus management? How do you balance across the different things government does? There was a report back in, I think, 2011 the Ontario government commissioned this big report by an economist named Don Drummond. And he wrote a report that said, that gave guidance to the Ontario government about these kinds of questions. How should we balance off, management versus frontline? How should we balance off health versus education versus transportation? And the big, punchline coming from his report was, don't do things across the board, because some places are going to, some ministries are going to look different than other ministries. Some, in terms of that balance of management versus service delivery. Just to give an example of that, some ministries, a lot of their work might be centralized in Victoria or Vancouver. Economic development studies and things like that. They might have a bunch of economists working for them in Victoria or Vancouver. Whereas think of social services, people on income assistance or disability. That's going to be local service offices around the province. So as we think about the management of that, there's a regional aspect to some of these ministries where there isn't in other ministries. And so having a set rule of everyone has to have 10 frontline workers for every 2 management, you can't apply those rules across everywhere. You do want to have those metrics and understand them, but you got to dig deeper than trying to apply a blanket rule across everywhere. That's kind of what I took from the Drummond report from 15 years ago. You can find that online by Googling it up. And I think it's a really good just framework to have, is that, measuring these things is good, but you want to take, have your eyes open to understanding why there are differences within ministries, across ministries, in how these kinds of metrics look.
Mm-hmm. So Kevin, as we get close to wrapping up here, I just want to ask you, are there public policy recommendations based on maybe other provinces that do a really great job that you think BC should be considering? Is there 1 or 2 that are on your list to say, geez, it would be great if BC took this approach because it's working somewhere else?
So I think 2 things. One is having that conversation openly and publicly about the tough choices we're having. A counterexample of that would be the last election we had, where both main parties were competing over tax cuts that were going to make their job a lot harder. Like, that's just not be on the table. Same thing in the federal election. I thought it was like that was not solving the problems we had, was to give these small tax cuts to as promises. So having that conversation of like how to change that long run trajectory. Maybe if you're the Conservatives, you want to argue that we ought to prime up growth. You want to do more on the corporate tax side. You want to do more on the GST or HST side to encourage more investment. Like that's a conversation you want to have, but having it in the frame of we have to change that trajectory. So having a more open conversation is one part of it. In terms of a public policy tool, this is a bit of an odd one, but in Quebec, what they did is they had something called the Generations Fund. You can say it in French if you like. I'll leave it in English for you and your listeners. But the Generations Fund, they had a surtax on some parts of their economy where they put it in a fund. And then that fund was used explicitly to retire public debt. Now, for a lot of accountants and maybe economists, they think like, this is just, 3-card Monty. It's over here, it's over there. You're kind of just shifting stuff around. But in terms of getting the public to buy into maybe a bit more tax here and there, it actually worked in Quebec. There's a good article we have in the Canadian Tax Journal that goes over exactly why it worked, how it worked. And it seems to have been successful in turning around. Like, Quebec was really, to be frank, a basket case 20 years ago. They were in a bad trajectory. They turned it around in part because of their use of this Generations Fund, where they took a surplus tax revenue and put it in the side fund that they use explicitly to retire provincial debt. And so, again, as I said, accountants and economists might think this is just a fiscal trick, but, the proof is in the pudding. It seemed to work in Quebec, and I think it might work in BC as well.
Kevin, we've had another eminent economist on named Don Wright, who feels that it's important for us to be realistic and clear-eyed about putting our effort where revenue is for balancing the books. But I would say, if Don was here today, that some of the old revenue tools are getting blunt, and we could argue why that's the case. Like, forestry is not going to be producing the revenues that historically it did. You can argue about why that's the case, but it's just a lower cut, even if we did the whole cut. Likewise, real estate, clearly, was about 1/3 of the economy in the Lower Mainland, is slowed right down for the reasons you pointed to and other reasons. What does the future economy look like to you if we get people in who have a good understanding of what's going to be necessary for revenues and for jobs for people? What do you see coming? Is it going to go back to the old way, or we got to find something new?
So I see two things. One is, there is revenue growth in this budget on resources. It's not in forestry, it's in natural gas.
Yeah.
Right.
And so there's like $600 million a year over the space of 2 years increase in revenue. And that's not coming from, fantastic, projections of prices and revenue. This is the quantity. We're shipping more of this stuff. Wood fiber is going to start shipping really soon on Howe Sound. And Canada LNG, the big one, it will be in service in a few years. We have to think about whether we have the royalty regime right on those. I don't know what it looks like right now. I don't have that detail, but I think that's the right question to ask. Whether it's forestry, whether it's natural gas, we want to make sure we optimize, that we get the growth in the product we're shipping and getting a fair share of that revenue for BC taxpayers as well. So that's one item of where the growth is. The other growth is in the human capital economy, the humans that we bring in. When we bring in new economists to teach at UBC or SFU or UVic, when we're bringing in knowledge sector workers who are working on whether it's the tech sector, whether it's in a resource sector where they're applying more high tech skill to it, making sure that we have a tax regime that supports people developing skills. And there's a bunch of skill development stuff in the budget, which is good. But thinking about that and as the growth part of the economy is an important thing. It's not just about shipping more logs and kilojoules of natural gas. It is about the brains we are bringing into BC that help us to grow the economy. And so having our focus on that as well.
One last question on growth. Because LNG Canada's phase two part of their project and Silism's LNG, which are both massive projects among the biggest private sector investments in the history of the country, they haven't had their final investment decisions yet. Those aren't booked into the budget as assumptions for growth. If they both go ahead, do you have a gut estimate of what impact that would make on economic growth for BC?
I don't have an estimate, though I do recall an election campaign here where at the time Premier Clark was dreaming about what we could do with all the revenue. And perhaps, that is a conversation we'll get to have in a few years. It will be hundreds of millions, if not billions of extra revenue when those things come online, if we do get the go-ahead for final decision on those. So that's a big boost to growth and to tax revenue. So those are big deal things.
Well, would you maybe a half a point in growth, you think? Or is that too much?
That's most likely too much, more than you'd expect to get from that.
Yeah.
But it's going to be material. It's going to matter. We'll see it on the budget numbers. We'll see it on the growth numbers. So those are, those are big projects that will have an impact as they go forward.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Kevin, thank you for coming in today and sharing your expertise and helping demystify the budget. You obviously were raised very well by your mother, because you started off the interview with some compliments about the budget. And, that was noted.
I tried to be one of those fair-handed economists on the one hand, on the other hand. That's my training.
I came in feeling downgraded, but now I think I'm going to stay the course.
Okay. Well, Kevin, thanks. And we'll hope to have you back on Hotel Pacifico soon.
Anytime. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
When wild salmon return, coastal communities and economies thrive. By transitioning away from Pacific ocean-based salmon farms, we can rebuild salmon runs and restore the health of our waters, reviving ecosystems that coastal communities rely on, bringing back tourism, expanding local business, and generating thousands of good year-round jobs across coastal regions. And we can create new opportunities with future-focused industries like modernized land-based aquaculture that protects wild salmon, strengthens food security, and supports workers and families. That's according to our new sponsor, Wild First. For them, it's essential nation-building work, built in partnership with First Nations, that will unlock long-term economic opportunity and attract global investment to Canada's coastal industries. Let's secure a strong, sustainable coastal economy for generations with the wild salmon economy. Wild first. Let opportunity flow. Visit wildfirst.ca.
We're joined here by Larry Neufeld, MLA for Peace River South. Larry's going to join us for a few minutes to give us an update on the situation at Tumbler Ridge. And Larry, you're actually on your way to Tumbler Ridge right now?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm on my way to one of the victims' funerals.
It's obviously been a horrendous week in terms of the events. Perhaps not, perhaps in some ways, community showing its strength and how it's come together. But how is the community doing in light of all this?
Every day is a little better than the previous day. I would suggest that I was down. I won't suggest that I was, but I was in the community before daybreak on the day after, and meeting with people, having conversations with them. The best way I can describe it is that it had a post-apocalyptic feel to the community at the time. It felt very cold. It felt very empty. People were speaking to you, intelligent conversations, but the eyes were glazed. I don't feel that we were in shock as a community at that point, but it was something beyond it, beyond shock. And slowly, day by day, it's things are. I don't know. I don't want to use the word better, but things are improving in terms of returning to some type of sense of normalcy, which again is a word I'm hesitant to use, but for lack of any proper English words that would describe the situation, that's the best I can do.
And obviously I think a lot of British Columbians watch the vigil live on television. Um, walk us through how everything kind of came together in the days after the event in terms of how governments and community representatives and community members all kind of all came together at that vigil. What was that? What was that like? How did that organically take place?
It was a situation that I myself made clear publicly on most of the interviews that I did, that politics is not welcome in this situation and it wouldn't be tolerated. And what I would say is that what British Columbians saw in the vigil, the absolute absence of partisanship from federal leaders, from provincial leaders, that was real. It truly was. I've been in politics for about 16 months now, and it is, to say the least, there's a lot of things that go on that one thing is said, another thing is done. That is not the case in this circumstance. This truly was nonpartisan. It was people of different stripes coming together. Everyone hugged. Everyone was shaking hands. Everyone was sharing the same tears and the same dread for the community.
In Lytton, we lost the town, mercifully only a couple of lives, but the rebuild has been very difficult and challenging and hard on the community. Are you seeing some themes that are emerging in this very different circumstance at Tumbler Ridge, which the government should take on long term that are going to be needed?
That's a really good question, and I do get it asked quite often. My honest answer is I believe that we're still too early. We're still in the grieving stage, and to really answer that question, at least to answer it appropriately, what I would say at this point is there are a significant amount of resources in the community of all types. In fact, each time I go, I'm myself finding more resources that are there that I wasn't necessarily aware of. So it's really at this point, the community is focusing on initiating the healing process, whatever that might look like. But again, the longer term things, it's very difficult to say at this point.
I want to ask just about you and your role as MLA. You've been thrust into this position by these circumstances. There's no operating manual for these types of situations, thank goodness, frankly.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thankfully.
But how did you know what to do? What was guiding you as you learned, and what was the first 24 hours like for you? Like how, in terms of, I'm asking that question so people get a sense of the role of MLA in these exceptional circumstances.
No, absolutely. And Again, as you say, thankfully, we do not have a playbook for this whatsoever. And for very good, thankful reasons, we don't have one. What I would say is I was able to react in a means. I'm a former infantry platoon commander. I'm an engineer that owns 4 different businesses. I've operated professionally, internationally. I I did a lot of spill response, a lot of emergency response. So it is something that I did have a reasonable amount of training on with respect to emergency response, setting up command stations. Those are all things that I initially did, and thankfully I had that experience in my background to have an idea on what the if we want to call it the hard assets on the ground needed to be. But when it comes to the people, it's just being a human being, reaching out, talking to them, walking the streets, sharing their pain, hugging, sharing their tears, and really just connecting and trying to get them in touch with the help that's available and the help that they need.
How can people outside Tumbler Ridge help?
You know, that's a huge question that I get in almost every interview. I The honest answer is there are massive resources on the ground right now. I know that when people are extending their hearts and their prayers and their thoughts, it is heard, it is felt, and the people of Tumbler Ridge do appreciate it.
Well, we know you're on your way to some more events in Tumbler Ridge right now, so we don't want to detain you. And thank you very, very much for taking the time to fill us in today.
Anytime.
Thank you, and safe travels. Okay, we're in the strategy suite. It was definitely, Geoff, great that Larry Neufeld could join us and squeeze us in, given the obligations he has as MLA to the people of Tumbler Ridge right now. But it's, I think, important to share with our listeners here his perspective and how he's trying to do his part as MLA.
Well, it's very easy for these issues to fall off the radar, no matter how big they seem at the time. So it's great that he's able to take the time and communicate that reality on the ground back to a wider audience, which he's doing obviously on many, many platforms.
Yeah, I mean, he noted in our quick discussion with him that he's been an MLA for 16 months, and so of course, when you're faced with situations like this, you're not just drawing upon your experience as MLA, you're drawing on everything you've ever done in your life. So he mentioned he's drawing on his experiences that he's had before politics, and it sounds like he's had a lot of training that helps him in this moment, and helps the community in this moment. So that's good to hear.
Well, I think the Tumbler Ridge issue pulls out so many broader questions in BC politics today that it's good to keep an eye on for that reason alone. And I'm thinking about mental health care and voluntary care, all of those issues around mental health and the failure of services in that area, and how hard it is to deliver services, whether it's cancer or mental health, in small communities that are far off the beaten track, like Tumbler Ridge is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a lot of lessons for us on a whole number of fronts that'll go far beyond the exact events of that day.
Right. Well, on to regularly scheduled programming here in Strategy Suite.
Back to the budget.
There was a budget last week, which we've been talking about today on the more of the policy side, but let's talk about the politics of it. The Premier showed up at the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade late last week, I think, to ostensibly sell the budget. I don't think it really worked out that way. In fact, I'm not sure when this changed, but usually in the old days, the finance minister would go out and do the speech after the budget, right? And I mean, we had some exceptions to that in the BC Liberals. Sometimes the Premier would do it, but Bailey was out before the budget and Eby was out after the budget. I wonder if that makes a difference, whether they might want to have rethunk that a bit.
Well, I don't know. This, as you know, Mike, the trail laid out for a finance minister is a very arduous one under the best of circumstances, because the minister gets up in the House, delivers the budget. It's a grueling day that starts with the lockup, a budget speech in the lockup, a lot of questions, an enormous amount of material for the finance minister to master. Then it's into the House, debate begins, you have to monitor all that. But very quickly have to go on the road and meet those bond rating agencies who, even in the best of times, are miserable cusses in New York who've studied this stuff exhaustively. So this is a long, long trail for Brenda Bailey. But normally, I would say you're right that she would have been at the Board of Trade, and I wasn't there. I don't know. Did you attend yourself to the Board of Trade?
I did not.
Well, Rob Shaw reported that Premier seemed deflated and kind of a bit overwhelmed. And I thought, well, the broader context is not just the budget; it's also the Tumbler Ridge events and the enormous emotional drain that must have taken from everything I heard. Premier did very well in his contribution in Tumbler Ridge, and but it was clear that he was shaken by the stories that he heard and the experience that he had there. And then the budget, unlike most budgets, where no matter what you're thinking inside, you're trying to communicate as great news, was accepted ahead of time by Brenda Bailey as bad news. And so going in front of the Board of Trade was maybe him stepping into the line of fire so that she didn't have to in that case, because it was clear that that audience would be very unhappy with what it saw.
I mean, I think if they had a do-over, they would do over how they managed expectations before the budget.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were misaligned with, I think, what people thought was going to happen. I think people were ready for a smaller, probably deeper cuts and a smaller deficit. I think that's probably what the expectations were. Now, obviously, people who do get cut, they're going to complain anyways. And there's definitely a lot more media coverage about people that didn't get what they wanted than there is about people happy that there are people not getting what they wanted.
But I think that there was a surprise to me, as I said earlier, that the 1.4 billion in housing disappeared, because that set two groups of stakeholders off. One was the municipalities, which have been working very hard to try to get it done, and the nonprofit sector, which has been really underdeveloped over the years and probably could afford to have more investment, notwithstanding what Kevin Milligan told us earlier.
Yeah, there's lots that's been deferred. Student housing project in UVic got deferred 5 years. There's all sorts of examples of things being pushed a year here, a year there. And Lord only knows what's going to happen with the Massey Tunnel or whatever it's going to be called. So that's sitting there as a big question mark.
There's a lot of equipment there. I drove right past the site, and
isn't there? I think there's kind of an asterisk on the cost right now as to like they're not committing to the ultimate cost of it. So
well, they haven't selected a contractor, but they are clearing the right of way, and a whole bunch of trees are cut down on both sides of the crossing there just before you go underground. So we'll see. And they did cut the ribbon on the Tumbler Bridge. I'm sorry, I don't remember the indigenous name, but the new replacement.
Stella Awesome Bridge, which I drove across. I drove across on the weekend with my mother, who's 93. And she pipes up as we're driving across the bridge. She says, well, I walked across the Tumbler Bridge when it was opened in 1937. I said, I've never heard that story before. Because her uncle's house got moved because the road to the old Tumbler Bridge was going to go through their house, and the house got moved half a block, so they got invited to walk across the bridge. So there you go. 1937, GCPE of 1937 was on its game, making sure the community was happy.
That's right. That's right.
So, anyways, back to the budget. You know, you had the finance, the cabinet obviously knew where this was heading last fall. Yet they, frankly, buckled on the BCGEU deal and gave them the pretty rich contract relative to the province's fiscal situation, ability to pay. So I think, like, why would they do that? And then I remembered, because there was a leadership review. So,
well, there was more to it than that.
Well, it was a pretty big one. I would call this the most expensive leadership review in the history of Canadian taxpayers.
Well, there was a long strike. I don't think we should leave the union membership out of the equation. The Horgan settlement, which I was there for, was the best in Canada at the time. Probably people like me thought at the time that's the catch-up one. From here on in, it'll be closer to the norm. Yeah. But that was not the view of the BCGEU leadership or the membership. They took a big strike vote. They prepared for it for months and months and months, and that had gone on for a long, long time. when the government decided to find out from Vince Reddy and his his associates, what the settlement would be, Reddy did what he always did. He said, if you want to settle this, it's going to cost you this much. At that point, I think the government had very, very tough choices to make because it's been catastrophic for NDP governments to order or people back to work or impose a collective agreement. So what they had to do then was to steel themselves for the alternatives, which are going to happen anyway, I think, which is layoffs, privatization, automation. They have to rein in the size of the overall unit, and
They've just
notwithstanding.
deferred the pain. They deferred well, made it
Well, and
argue. I
some,
would say they made it worse, and then they're going to have to deal with it anyways, as you said.
there's a problem that the labor movement has, and I was there when it happened to us with the Gordon Campbell government election in 2001, which is that he changed his mind about his commitment to protect the HEU agreement at the time and rolled back wages 15%. That was a 20-year setback for working women who, were vindicated legally later, but still will never make up the lost wages and the many, many different employers they went through and so on. It was really a bad time. What is facing the union down the road is changes that could occur. And you've mentioned this, Mike, and it's happened in the past. People have raised it, like privatization of the liquor distribution branch, where all of a sudden they would still be unionized, but they'd be in a private sector employer. And a lot of the highways contracts that are out there are still BCGU, but they're with private contractors that are doing highways maintenance and snow plowing and so on. This is not what the union wants, but could happen. And I also think that there's a ton of room for business modification or process modification in the public sector. I'll just give one example: the continuance of the use of fax for parts of the distribution of medical records. That's in healthcare, especially. I would think if you went to look at how health management organizations in the States run, you would learn a lot of lessons about the application of technology and so on. And it may be that a new government will have a stronger hand to simply tell squabbling parts of the healthcare system that it's going to be this way from here on in because that's the way it has to be done. And I think that those changes are going to be necessary, and they may be painful. They may not lead to layoffs, and hopefully they'll lead to improved care in some cases. But I think the table's been set for a lot of changes on that front.
Well, there was well, what can I say? I don't want to keep harping about the past, but I mean, one thing I think this situation calls for is a lot of managerial energy.
That's right.
To figure it out, right? And there's a lot of smart people at the top, as there is in any government, right? But I feel like they're on defense so much. It's they got to punch their way out of this with some big ideas and some big changes. It's not going to be fixed with small increments. It's going to be fixed with bigger ideas. So anyways, I will wait to see Brenda Bailey's trip to New York if she comes back with the Bond Trader Customer of the Year award that I'm expecting that BC will get. To your point about bond traders earlier. Okay, so obviously the budget politics is going to go on for a while.
Can we just pause there briefly on the combination of Tumbler? We never got a throne speech.
Yeah.
I realize in retrospect why that was necessary.
Yeah.
But the government never did say in any kind of an elevator pitch with all the other stuff that goes to throne speech, this is what we're going to do for the next little while. And I don't think it really came out in the budget speech either. So I was interested in Kevin Milligan's comment about the economy. There were pieces that could have been pulled together into a stronger growth pitch. And so far, the legislation brought into the House is not particularly interesting to the wider public. They're worthy little bills on various fronts. So we're going to be debating the budget and discussing it for a long time, I think, and we'll see how that all plays out.
By far, growth is the best option than cutting spending.
Yes,
by far,
way
right?
more fun. Way more fun.
So even just writing off the politics of the last week, I mean, the government could still lean into growth, but they have to. It's going to take more than press conferences. They actually have to have policies that are going to enable growth.
Well, they had a good announcement the other day announcing a mine expansion, and a long-standing mine, but it's going to keep growing. I forget
Copper Mountain,
Copper Mountain.
So, but they just
Hud Bay, yeah.
I mean, when you have I don't know how many the Board of Trade had a press conference this morning decrying the budget along with a whole bunch of business stakeholders. So obviously they're not happy, but well, what's the plan to quote Bridget Anderson, get to 3% growth?
Mm-hmm. That's
I mean,
right.
I know Ravi Kalan's probably one of their stronger ministers on these files in terms of voicing support for that, but it's hitting the brick wall of reality. Now, as we said in the Milligan interview, some of these major projects haven't really been accounted for, and if they do go ahead this year and the LNG stuff goes ahead this year, it will help. It'll move them forward. If more mines get greenlit, it'll move them forward. Well, what about the rest? So,
Hmm.
I mean, the atmosphere for investment is not great right now, in part because of the drip of stuff, but in part just because, this budget didn't help either, and other things, just the prevailing mood and the Trump tariffs and all that stuff. So, anyways, TBC.
Yes, indeed.
Um, okay, so conservatives. Um, Nominations have closed. They've had to get their signatures in. Reportedly 11 potential candidates, 2 women, 9 men, 5 MLAs, one former MLA, one former candidate, one former MP, and 3 political newcomers is the how I broke it down. Um, let's go through the list. We've got Peter Millibar, who's expected to be on the ballot, expected to be my opinion, a top 3 contender.
Yeah.
Sheldon Clare, MLA from Caribou Prince George. Now, one thing people are saying is that even though 11 filed their papers, they still have to go through an interview process with this LEOC committee, and then they also have to hit some mileposts for putting money down. So I think the expectation is 11. There's not going to be 11 on the ballot come May. There may not even be 11 come March, so it might be 8, 9, 7, who knows, right?
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here, even though I know very little about the inner workings of the Conservative Party, and say we're not going to see a repeat of what we saw with uh, Kevin Falcon's organization, where BC United, where Aaron Gunn was thrown out before he could even draw a breath. I think most of these people are going to be left to try to drop out on their own, and I don't think we'll see too many of them cancel unless there's some horrendous smoking gun there. So I don't think this is really a vetting process about their views or compatibility. I think it's going to be, can they make various benchmarks financially? That's what I suspect. There you go.
I don't know. Those
Way out on
conservatives are
a
those
way out on a limb
conservatives are
there.
better. They're better
No
at
cancel
canceling
culture.
people than you think they are.
Okay, but they'll be canceled for other reasons than
They'll
their
be canceled.
views.
So Sheldon Clare, MLA Caribou Prince George, around there. Might got the writing name wrong. I'm not sure. Harmon Bangu, MLA Langley Abbotsford, friend of Hotel Pacifico. He jumped in the very last minute of
But
the
he always
nomination
said he wouldn't
deadline.
run if Aaron Gunn didn't, and here he is.
Well, yeah, and I think there's an expectation that some of that Aaron Gun machinery might help Harmon. Steve Cooner, MLA for Richard Zussman's favorite riding of Richmond Queensboro. He is the Attorney General critic. And someone who's played footsies in the past with the federal Liberals. So I know that's come up in conversation, although he might contest that, or maybe he can't contest it. I think he might have sought well, I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but I know that's just circulating. I don't know much about him actually. Bruce Banman, former BC Liberal MLA for Abbotsford area, who was John Rustad's right-hand man. First guy to defect after Rustad to the Conservatives. Then you got Ian Black, former Board of Trade CEO, former Campbell area cabinet minister. He is also seen as, I think, on the medal podium of the candidates here. Strong back room in his campaign. Yuri Fulmer. Now about Yuri Fulmer, he's the business guy. Ran for the Conservatives last election, didn't make it in West Van Sky, lost to Jeremy Valeriot. But he is taking a tact in this campaign of being the true conservative and attacking Caroline Elliott in particular for being a part of the United Liberal 2.0 crowd. And I have to admit, it does come across as a bit disingenuous to me.
I don't find it landing personally.
Yeah.
But then I'm not in that world. So
Well, he's just trying to sell memberships to conservatives, I guess. But I mean, Yuri Fulmer was a a supporter of the BC Liberals. So I don't know why he feels he's so different than some of the other people in the race that had been BC Liberals as well. I mean, as I said in the previous episode, everyone who was an NDP or Green was pretty much a BC Liberal at one point, whether they liked it or not. So anyways, we'll see. I mean, Yuri's spending money and he's out campaigning hard, but I don't know. Carrie Finley, former MP. Now, she put out this poll, and I'm air quoting the word poll here, from ERG National Research, which breathlessly announced that she was the front runner. So the Canadian Research Insights Council, the industry body that oversees research standards in Canada, has specifically issued a warning about ERG National Research. They caution that this entity is not a member of their council. I'm sure they don't care about that, but anyways, they're not part of the Standards Council of Canada polling, let's just put it that way. So they're basically saying, buyer beware. If you're believing numbers from this company, it doesn't come with the blessing of the Canadian Research Insights Council. Now, I think this company is connected with other companies that do conservative political work, and probably a big who cares from a lot of people about this stuff. But I think it's indicative of strategies to make a candidate look like they have more support than they probably do. And some big eye rolls from other campaigns about these tactics. So anyways, that's what Carrie Finley's campaign's up to. And I see that there's a bit of a slapping of the wrist that her campaign is having federal conservative associations are promoting an event for her rally that she's having this week, and the federal party is a little concerned about this because they don't want to get embroiled in the provincial race. So a lot of these little side dramas going on. The rounding out the list, we got Save on Daryl. He's got some videos circulating. He's got a lot of hand movement. I noticed he's very big on the hand movement. So he's very excited for British Columbia, excited for 2-for-1 deals in healthcare and all sorts of things. Warren Ham from Rosslyn, who's a small business guy, the first guy to announce, will he make the cut? At the end of the day, will he go all the way to the distance and put up the money and all that stuff? I don't know. And then we have Caroline Elliott, who
familiar to our viewers.
Yeah, friend of the show, front runner status in my mind. I don't know. I haven't seen the membership numbers, but feels like she's the one they're chasing.
She's faced a lot of charges that she's a phony or born a recently born conservative, but I think she gave some pretty persuasive arguments that was not the case, that she had deep roots in the federal conservatives for sure. Yeah. Her videos are very, very strong, very much emphasizing the Indigenous issues and have a heavy attack on the devastation that the NDP's brought on the province. And I'll be interested to see whether she's able to attract much caucus support or what kind of endorsers she'll have, because she is an outsider from that standpoint and never been elected to public office.
Our air quotes media colleague, Corey Tonight, stopped by to visit me last week. And always a pleasure to see Corey. He's helping Caroline Elliott. Mm-hmm. And I will say that he was wearing a lot more leather than I was wearing that day. So...
Did he arrive on a motorcycle?
He may well have. I should have checked the lobby. It might have been a leather-clad scooter for all I know. But anyways, Corey he's got feet on the ground here in British Columbia in support of Caroline. I think there's a lot of things she's got going for her, but I think the questions will be experience. And she'll have to answer that, right? And also the full range of things she's going to talk about in the campaign. Like obviously, what's her answer on the economy and managing this budget situation stuff. Because even if you're not the front runner, but you're seen as a contender, and Peter, Ian, in my mind, seem to be the contenders, and I'm sure many others will take umbrage with that. But it comes with a higher standard of scrutiny, and all these candidates should be stress tested as part of this process. Like, this might be the presumptive premier.
That's right.
So it's like, okay, conservatives, it's a, I don't know how many people are going to vote at the end of the day, but it's going to be a fraction of overall British Columbia voters. So you have the privilege, if you join the party in the next month or so, to influence who could be the next premier of the province. So let's give these guys a road test and make sure they end up, hopefully the members end up picking the one that's the best.
Well, the Conservative polling numbers and the NDP polling numbers are remarkably resilient. And although the NDP numbers have been declining a bit, the Premier's approval ratings remain better than the party's, and he's seen some deterioration in his position, but he's by no means in a state of crisis. I imagine in the NDP caucus, there's some anxiety, but this will be a kind of a period of phony war in some respects, because although Trevor Halford's doing a valiant job of interim leader for the Conservatives, until we know who that new leader is and whether that person is actually in the House, it'll be hard to assess what the prospects are for the NDP after the summer.
We should rank the greatest interim leaders in BC politics history. Let's where does Trevor going to fit?
Dan Miller,
Shirley Bond, who else? Rich Coleman. There's a legion of them.
Yeah, they probably have a club that meets periodically.
Where does Trevor Halford fit in? Yeah, the interim leaders club. We should have the
Don Davies.
Yeah, good one.
Got so lots of them here in BC.
I feel a blog post coming on. I also feel the minibar coming on.
Okay.
What do you got this week?
Well, I'm going to raise a glass to the chief constable in Abbotsford, whose name is Colin Watson. He spoke out on February the 10th about the extortion crisis and made a direct appeal to the public to come forward and work with the police, to express a lot of frustration about what's happening. And I thought it was a very interesting piece. I didn't know anything about Colin Watson. I read his bio. He's got a graduate degree in law. He's a 27-year-old veteran of urban policing, especially in Victoria. He's got an extra degree in human resource management. So, like many police officers at the senior level, he's highly qualified person. And Abbotsford, in spite of its semi-rural reputation, has been a hotbed for crime for a long time, all the way back to the days of grow-ops and things like that. There's a reason there's a school of criminology at the University of the Fraser Valley. So he's an important figure in policing. I would say after Vancouver and Victoria, Abbotsford is an important place. And he's saying, look, we're not making the headway we should make. After a series of extortion attempts in Abbotsford, 2 arrests in that long period of time. So he's calling for that collaboration with the public. He's calling for the confidence of the public and the commitment of the police to work on this, but also pointing to systemic issues in lack of resourcing and in legal problems that we've talked about on the show before that make it hard for prosecutions to occur. So I appreciated his candor. So I'm going to raise a glass to Chief Constable Colin Watson for refusing to paint over some of the cracks that are in the current federal-provincial effort on extortion.
Okay.
More of that would be good. I like the transparency.
Well, I'm going to take a shot at the Prime Minister Mark Carney this week. It's been about a year, and his record in defending Canada is abysmal. The men's Olympic hockey team, the women's Olympic hockey team, the Blue Jays, Edmonton Oilers, Vancouver Whitecaps have all fallen to American competition in the past year, and I'd like to know when he's going to turn that around.
Yeah. You want to see some elbows?
I want to see elbows up here. I'll tell you. So Prime Minister, you may think your poll numbers are good, but the results speak for themselves. 0 for 5 right there. So let's turn it around there, big guy. So thanks to Kevin Milligan and Larry Neufeld for visiting Hotel Pacifico this week. Thanks to our sponsors for allowing us to bring this episode to you for free. See you next week. BC, you can never leave.